Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru.
Welcome to the Yogananda podcast, Autobiography of a Yogi, line by line. Today we're discussing chapter 4, the second part, and with the usual crowd. How's Chris doing today?
Fantastic. Yeah, fantastic. I've got a call with the SRF applying to my Korea initiation today. So excited about that. It's a big day for me today. Very
Fingers
excited.
crossed. I believe a couple of weeks ago they stood you up, didn't they?
They were meant to call, yeah. We'll have to call them out for that, yeah. They were meant to call. Administrative time was lacking. I took it as a sign of Guruji telling me to meditate more. So
you're not ready. You think you're ready.
Exactly. Today's the day.
It's going to be good. So, but Chris might, for that reason, drop off the call. So don't be alarmed, dear listeners, if that does happen. So, and I'm also with Mike and Lauren.
Hello.
Hey.
So today's episode is about the story continues where young Mukunda, his plan for departing to the Himalayas in search for his guru is now not only being prepared for and planned, he's actually jumping on trains and meeting railway officials and getting harassed by them, and meeting Dwarka Prasad, the landlord's son, who's making him doubt, and some really nice topics in there. It's also pretty funny again, some comedic elements in there. There's some topics that we're going to discuss, things like truth and doubt and faith and all those things that you have to really look at the story and look at what's being said and look and try and feel the emotions that the different parties, the trio, the three musketeers are facing. The three musketeers being Jatinda, Mukunda and Amar. So yes, so very much looking forward to that. And it's quite a long section, but do follow along. It's mostly a narrative and talking as opposed to deep philosophy. So hopefully it shouldn't take too long. So the first sentence, he talks about pretty much where he's going and where he's starting from. So they're going to Haridwar, which is really on the foot of the Himalayas, and that is a very ancient and holy city, hallowed by saints, many saints, including Swami Paramahansa. His ashram is in nearby Rishikesh. We talked about in the last chapter, the saint with two bodies. But there's many other chapters, many other saints there. Mike?
So the two things that I could think of were like Swami Pranabananda and Ananda Moima. And at this point, neither of them would have been there by that time, right? But it's, I guess it's also a place where holy people, like saints, get attracted to over the centuries, right?
Indeed. I think the Beatles went there, didn't they, for the Guru Mahesh. Chris?
Did they also open an ashram? Okay.
May have done.
Yeah, with the Beatles' popularity in Brazil, you would think that they have ashrams over here. So many people walking around with T-shirts of the Beatles. Yeah, it's funny to me reading this, and it struck me a couple of times reading Yogananda's poetic way of writing, that he makes everything sound divine, right? And the way he talks about places with such love and devotion to the people that are there and the places themselves. Yeah, he just sprinkles magic on on every place that he talks about. And so my impression is that everywhere in India is holy, and every city's holy. So I know we're going to go into a little bit on these places, but it's funny, as a layperson, never been to India. I'm like, wow, I really want to go and visit and spend a couple of months trying to visit as much as possible, because it all sounds so holy and so divine there.
Yes, Haridwar is also holy because it's pretty much the start of the holy river Ganga and the Ganges. Just probably 20, 30 miles north of that is where two rivers merge and becomes the Ganga. So there's pretty much, we're talking about the origin of the Ganga, and Ganga is a very holy river for people of India, and goes pretty much across the northern plains of India all the way to Calcutta. They also have a very, very beautiful arati there, which is offering. It's a song offering to the Divine Mother, and that happens every night, and it's supremely powerful because it's on the bank of the river, and everyone attends with like a fervor of devotion. It's quite beautiful. Don't know, Mike, did you when you were there, did you do an arti? Did you see any of the arti devotional offerings?
I think they happen at night, right?
Correct.
That's probably why I did not.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't. Well, you were a morning bird.
Yeah, we drove through. We went there. We stayed for a few hours, and then we kept going. We were on our way to Dwarhat.
Nice. It's quite nice, that part of the Himalayas, because when you look in the distance, you'll just see what you think are clouds with the sun, shining over the top of a silver cloud, but it's not cloud, it's the Himalayas. And then they're so high that you can't see from the top, you can't see the middle part, you can only see the snow peaks. So then you think it's like part of the sky, but it's it's absolutely stunning to behold. So highly recommend that. And Haridwar and Rishikesh are very accessible, so you don't need to be a mountain climber and suffer severe trials of poor accommodation and poor roads as you do the further north and the further into the heart of the Himalayas that you go to. So they were starting at a ticket to Burdwan or Vardhaman, which is the ancient name, and there's some links to the principal deity in the Jain faith, the Mahavir, who has some links there, which is quite nice. And then they were also going to Bareilly. Mike, I think, suggested that they used to live there, and hence Dwarka Prasad was lurking around in those parts, the landlord's son. And Bareilly is also the city of where Draupadi was from. Draupadi being the principal female character in the Mahabharata, very, very famous. Panchali, they used to call her, because that's where she was from. So that's an important place for Hindus because of that link to the epic Mahabharata. So yeah, some pretty cool names and pretty cool cities that I just mentioned in the first line. So he's not going just anywhere in the Himalayas. He's following, shall we say, a well-trodden path of mysterious ancient history, shall we say, Mike?
It's a well planned out pilgrimage that he's on, right? He stopped, and every place that he mentions is like a place of pilgrimage for Hindus, I would say.
Yes, Jains as well, apparently. So the story continues. So they're sitting on a train or a platform, and the three boys are having a banter conversation, and young Mukunda says, I can't wait, gonna basically, I'll just summarize the section that we're going to discuss in detail. So he says, I can't wait to experience samadhi or bliss consciousness, and we're going to have such a magnetic pull that tigers will become tame in our presence, and then what happens is, because he's saying that, Jatinda is absolutely horrified at the thought of tiger. Perhaps he's seen a tiger and you can't imagine a tame tiger. Mike,
I wonder what my reaction would be if I was there and I'm with Mukunda, who is a good friend, but you don't really know, you're all kids, right? And you go like, oh, he's going to lead us to the tigers now. And you go like, it's still a good idea. Do we know what we're doing here?
Doubting Thomas is being born, and
Belief.
Thomas Thompson. Tom is names that I'm going to discuss a bit later. And then so Jatinda, in his horrifying thought, he starts thinking about a plan to get out. And he kind of suggests that in this section we're just going to discuss about the splitting of the money, and then they essentially lose him. Mike?
It's funny how life is sometimes, right? You say a little sentence, just one of your imaginations, and that kind of destroys your whole plan, right? Without even you knowing it.
The sheer power of the spoken word, Chris.
Yeah.
And the moment that Yogananda had was, as we'll talk about, devastation, that the friend sort of betrayed him. But then what would have happened if he didn't betray him? What would have happened if he had said, yeah, okay, let's go, make pussycats out of tigers, and they actually had have succeeded in this plan because his friend, stayed with him. Would we all be here? Is a question I asked myself when I was reading this. So all these little setbacks in life, push us gently towards a path that hopefully is for the best.
So what you're saying is we should thank young Jatinda, whose name also has Judas associated with it.
Nothing that strongly, just more. God has a plan. Yes. Thank you, God.
Mike?
It would have been interesting to see this one pan out, because there wasn't really a destination, right? They were just going to the Himalayas and then expecting to find someone there, right? But there wasn't really a person that they communicated with beforehand that they would meet up with or something, right? So
not that we know of.
No, we know of. Yes, that's right.
Yes.
I do also wonder if this trip was destined never to be. If God wanted it to, it could have easily out, but I feel like it was always destined to never be. If I can use that word, but you know what I mean.
There's a famous Hindi film called Kal Ho Na Ho, which loosely translates to "Tomorrow May Never Be." It's quite a cool film. You should watch it. Chris?
We know in later segments and chapters of this book that the masters have a way of nudging toward doing actions that they desire when they so wish to have that done for lessons or for whatever purpose. And we know Yogananda was having visions of his master. So his master wasn't in the Himalayas, as far as we know. If he's referring to Sri Yukteswar, he wasn't there. So maybe there was an invisible hand at play, sort of helping nudge the wheels of motion toward toward Yogananda returning and going on the path that he ultimately did.
So we just talked about Jatinda's epic betrayal, which is in stark contradiction to young Amar, who was very enthusiastic and very with the plan. So whereas Jatinda was, scared stiff and thinking about how to get out, Amar was, it says here, enthusiastically smiling. So I think therein lies two different types of followers that you will encounter on this path. One which is a bit loose cannon, shall we say, and has the tendency to foil your spiritual plans, and actually has the opportunity to take you backwards, as Jatinda may have done in this case. And then there's the other type of friend or devotee that you may hang out with, and that one actually encourages you. And we know later on, Amar, in this section, Amar plays that role of encouraging the Mukunda. Can you imagine? So I thought that was it's quite cool how you've brought two friends, and one of them was, shall we say, going against the tide, and the other one was swimming very much with young Mukunda. So quite a good parallel to draw in our lives about the company that we keep. Again, I think we discussed that in a recent episode gone. So a couple of things in this section that I wanted to just spend a bit of time on. So Mukunda says, we shall be initiated by the masters and experience the trance of cosmic consciousness. So two things there. So he's saying that the trance of cosmic consciousness is going to come after being initiated. Initiated also means taking diksha, which Chris is about to speak to the monks about the Kriya initiation. So he's kind of saying that you first, pledge your loyalty and take initiation, and then you kind of experience this. So this is like the order of things. And then he talks about the experience of experiencing the trance of cosmic consciousness. And in that, we know he's talking about the samadhi state, i.e. the sabhikalpa samadhi or the nirvikalpa samadhi. And he calls it a trance. How do people feel about the word trance, Chris?
It's funny when you're raising this topic, because when I read it, I didn't stop to think about it at all with how it is commonly perceived. I know exactly what Yogananda means and how he's referring to it, but not that you've raised it. If you, in today's language, would say the word trance and refer to pretty much any subject outside of meditation, is really negative. You wouldn't want to be in a trance whilst doing some kind of action that might require some attentive action. But saying that, maybe if you're in a trance, you're in a zone, so you're kind of in that zone. So maybe I'm sort of speaking myself out of it, but I'm sure that commonly people would say trance is a negative thing that you don't want to be associated with too often. But we obviously we think about it in somewhat different terms.
There's certainly a hint of like a drug-induced state that many young people experience. Mike?
Yeah, there might not have been the kind of vocabulary that we use now as well, right? So maybe it was what some we would say now is a big word, but he didn't really mean that. Maybe he just meant he was very engrossed in this or something like that.
In the sense that obviously he was speaking in Bengali to his two friends, so unlikely that the word trance would have been used, although sometimes you do mix English words when speaking one of the Indian languages and other languages as well. But obviously trance, in my opinion, as the decades and the century has worn on, I think is become a bit of a concept that's a bit of a misnomer, especially when used in a spiritual context such as this. And even within spiritual context, I've seen it interpreted negatively, in the sense that, experiencing the trance or the samadhi state will actually take you to a state where you can't think about God because you'll be in this state. So people are actually, even in the faith, are using it in a context that they're completely misunderstanding what the notion of being in samadhi is. It's being at one, being at one with God. So then people actually say, oh, you don't want to meditate because you become entranced, and then you can't offer your devotion to God. And then I found it, I've had that conversation with people about how that's not the correct interpretation of that, and I've been very dismayed, shall we say, in the outcome of those conversations at times. So that's why me and my relationship with the word trance is not necessarily a good one. But yeah, the next, Chris,
it's the company that you're keeping, Priyank.
Mm.
I'm
Well,
joking. I've never had that problem before.
You go on.
No, go ahead.
It's because I often talk about God and these lofty spiritual pursuits to my friends of all different spiritual paths, much to my wife's dismay. She's like, oh, why do you keep talking about this? Just keep it within. And I'm like, I can't help it. Doing a podcast. Yes. So yeah, that's the trance. And then the next line is that the attraction, basically the attraction to tigers. He's saying that it will become, so charged with magnetism that the animals in the Himalayas will become drawn to us. And magnetism in this context is he's talking about in the sense that they become the animals become tame because you become so spiritually elevated that all beings will be drawn to you, and there'll be a aura of love regardless of what the animal is and where you may at one stage be prey. In this case, you'll just be a lover in a sense. So magnetism in that context is quite a beautiful ambition. It's one that I think does come. Guruji tells us it comes with, with our practices as we get deeper and as we go more in tune with the teachings. Chris?
Yeah, it's a funny one. He's not talking about any animal either, any old animal. I'd say he's talking about one of, if not the most ferocious predators on the planet, a tiger. So whenever I read it, it did strike me like, wow, that's confidence. That's pure faith. That's coming from a place of pure strength, if he's saying that. And looking into developing magnetism and how to do these things, we have the lessons that Yogananda talks about this. And he talks in a fairly broad way about this, but he said that negative qualities, can combat this magnetic power. So if you have feelings of fear, anxiety, and hatred, revenge, these things, it can combat these things. So if you have any of that in you, maybe at any moment, to me, it struck me like, well, maybe if you fall out of this, this state of being attuned with God, the tiger might sense it and then pounce. So there is, I empathize to some degree with the fear that his friend expresses, I suppose, because it's not just anyone that can stay in that state for a permanent time. Let's say that it takes pure concentration that Yogananda clearly has, as an avatar. So I don't blame the friend for having fear struck in his heart for this to a degree, because it's a masterful statement and requires a lot of practice.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the company earlier, Chris, because I feel like Guruji is also very excited that he's not doing this journey alone. He's doing it with his friends, and they're his spiritual friends, right? And now he can finally open up about his spiritual dreams that he has, and unintentionally frightens one of them with how it's a very bold dream. Like I don't think that ever crossed my mind that I want to go to the Himalayas and start taming tigers there. So definitely he doesn't have any mental barriers when it comes to his spiritual aspirations.
What's really significant about this as well is that they're quite young, right? And when you're young, you tend to have your emotions, you wear them on the sleeve, let's say, a little bit more than what you do when you become older and you become able to control emotions and be even-minded. But that's what Yogananda says is, emotionalism is a very demagnetizing state. So if your emotions are running wild and you're not even-minded in the face of any difficulty, then that's a very demagnetizing thing. So no wonder he's got his friends there, yes, but if they're letting their emotions get the better of them, their magnetism might drop, and they might be sitting with the tiger one moment and he's friendly, and next moment not. So yeah, it is interesting. The power of magnetism is amplified by your friends, as Prerak did mention earlier on, but maybe some would demagnetize and some would strengthen your magnetism at the same time. So the two go hand in hand.
It definitely changes things, doesn't it, who you're around? But I also love his childlike approach to this. I know he is a child, but it just reminds me that we should be more like that if we're to attract God's love. They talk about this a lot, especially Guruji, approaching God like a child. And it just pours that kind of childish love and fantasy and imagination that they can do all these things, and I love that. And I feel like as adults we can get quite serious on this path, but it's a child's love, isn't it, for his father, that's making him think of all these beautiful and wild things that could happen. It's very sweet.
And we must not forget, we still have the spiritual yeast at work, right? We still have the amulet that is still pushing him to find.
But he didn't pack it though, Mike. He didn't pack it with him. That wasn't one of his essentials.
Yeah, and it's so when I heard that, and like I think we talked about this in an early episode, and when I heard this, I always thought an amulet is something you wear around your neck, right? But I don't think he was wearing that one around his neck all the time, right? Not sure.
Not sure. The other thing about tigers, Chris, you mentioned that they're the most ferocious predator on the planet, but isn't the humble army ant and the swarm of army ants one of
the individual maybe? I don't know. Yeah, I would take on an ant sooner than I'd take on a tiger.
How many army ants do you think it would take to finish a tiger?
Oof. I've never encountered an army ant. I've encountered plenty of fire ants and things out in Brazil, but I don't know if I've encountered, I don't know, a couple thousand.
They're destroying my lawn right now. They're making their mounds in the middle of my lawn.
Imagine what the tiger would do to your lawn.
But tigers,
talk nicely to them. Talk nicely to them. Ask them to leave.
Tigers, though, he's kind of. I think you put it in there. He's also laying the seed for a couple of chapters' time, where we've got a dedicated episode to the tiger in the Tiger Swami later on, which is going to be a fantastic chapter for us to review. Okay, so Jatinda is thinking about snaking this lovely plan of Mukunda's, and so he's saying, let's split the money into 3 portions, and we'll each then will be less conspicuous. So they all unsuspectingly agree, and Lauren mentioned she loves like the English of the how well the English complements the narrative.
It's lovely because Guruji just puts that word in, unsuspectingly agreed. And just from that one word, we know it's all going to fall apart, but we don't know how. And I love that it just comes from one word. And again, it shows the power of language, right? You only have to say one word for everyone to know exactly what's about to unfold. But Guruji is such a wonderful storyteller, isn't he? And that really comes to play here. So
I think it also shows that Jatinda was afraid to confront Mukunda about his change of plans, right? So he was sitting there, there was this long silence, and he was like, how can I get out of this? I don't want to tell them. And then somebody came up with this genius plan to just give him because he was like, okay, I got no money. How do I get back?
So the noble way of doing it, Mike, you're suggesting is it's fine to like be in this position of like complete fear and doubt. So the noble way you're saying is to just say, guys, I'm leaving.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course. And he knew that Mukunda would have tried to persuade him otherwise, right? And he would have probably succeeded. But so this was like his way of evading that.
Cowardly way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cowardly. Anyway, so the they go to that station, Burdwan, and they, Jatinda goes and gets his ticket, and then he completely disappears off the face of the planet. And Mukunda says he faded into the dark unknown surrounding the little station. Again, lovely use of English there. Personally, studying the autobiography has improved my English so much. My written English is unrecognizable from before to now, and I just often use Yogananda's technique of creative writing and English style. But yes. So then Mukunda he says, going into the next card, completely unnerved. He says he was numb, and that he couldn't imagine that God had, allowed this to happen. And he calls the romantic occasion was basically marred. He was saying cruelly marred. Again, very beautiful English. And then he speaks to Amar in whilst crying, and he's saying, Jatinda's departure is an ill omen, and our trip has to fail now. And yeah, Mike.
Yeah, the way he describes this is describing his way of seeing the world. So he's not blaming Jatinda. He's not going, why has Jatinda done this to me? So he goes, why has God allowed this to happen? Which is the kind of divine way of seeing it, and then anticipates bad things because of it. And well, he won't be wrong about that.
Which brings an interesting point. Here, Mukunda is saying he can't believe that God's kind of allowed this to happen. Kind of hints that God's forsaken young Mukunda, or he feels it. But can God ever forsake you? Even in your darkest hour, does he forsake you, Mike?
I don't think he forsakes you, but he does forsake your plans, right? So sometimes you are on a mission and you feel like this is exactly the right thing to do, and then you figure out it's not. And Mukunda was kind of, at this point, he was feeling it. It was like, oh no, maybe it is one of those.
Very nicely said. And then obviously Mukunda then also starts doubting his plan. And therein comes in a very important point about doubt about our spiritual path and what we're doing and what we're devoting our lives to. Is how important is doubt? Does having doubt make you any less of a devotee of Yogananda? Does it, or can you use it to energize your path? Chris, what do you think?
I think it may be more common than what we would like to admit in some ways on the spiritual in progress isn't necessarily linear in my experience. It's not just a genuine constant every day. I don't think that's necessarily common either. Maybe for some people it is, but for me it's not so much. It's plateaus and and then takes leaps and different paths like that. So I think there's space for doubt. And one thing that I found very reassuring was that in one of the lessons, Yogananda says, if you have any doubts or have any fears like that, pray and ask for clarification. Pray, pray on these doubts. And I think that's a really it brought me a lot of relief hearing that at one point on my journey, because Yogananda is there with you. He knows, what's going on in your mind and heart. And if you do have doubts, you can talk to Yogananda, you can talk to the gurus and ask them for guidance and say, give me the answers. Give me, I have some thoughts about X, Y, or Z. I need clarification. And it's something that, with Yogananda, why I love SRF and love Yogananda, is that he doesn't really leave too much room for doubt. He gives so many answers, so much information, and whether it be in wisdom or just truth and information elsewhere. It's a great path to be on in that sense. So I find this is probably the best path, for answers, if you have any answers or doubts that you can have. But certainly Yogananda does not want to shy away from that conversation either. He welcomes it and invites you to sort of have a conversation with him.
Yogananda talks a lot about doubt in all his literature, as the way of the devil sneaking into your thoughts and undoing your plans, taking away your momentum, taking away your strength, your power. And I mean, you just mentioned it, Priyank, in a way of being on a spiritual path, having doubt, and of course that's very difficult to be a devotee or in a persistent way when you have consistent doubts, right? So doubts are something you have to remove or work on. But in this case, also I feel like Mukunda is one thing he strikes me as is he's very authentic, right? He is the spiritual young boy, and he's doing something that he's truly passionate about. And doubt is of course something that takes the wind out of your sail, right? It takes the energy away, and that's very disappointing for him. And that's why this is also a moment where things could have fallen apart at this moment already.
The polar opposite of doubt, you might say, is faith. So to countenance and overcome doubt, you have to really strengthen your faith and really work at it every single day. And which is why the importance of being regular in your practice and being regular in bringing God into every facet of your life, making God part of, all your endeavors, saying thanks, saying prayers, all these things, before food, the worldwide healing service, all these things, if you do them, then it obviously strengthens that faith. And then there's no cracks, because then when there's a crack, then that's when the doubt can seep in, and like ice, then it can develop bigger and bigger, and can ruin your faith and all that stuff that you've worked so hard to develop, I suppose, as you go on, especially from where you start and where you are now. Certainly in my case. So yeah, then he obviously tells Amar, this, we got to go home. He says, this callous departure of Jatinda's is an ill omen. Now, this is a second mention of the ill omen paradigm. The first mention of it was with the rain on the start of this day that they were going about, going to the Himalayas. So again, kind of cementing the fact that this trip was doomed to failure. He kind of even says it in the next line, Mike.
And again, this shows his metaphysical understanding. So because the trip might as well go on with two, right? There's no reason why it wouldn't. The reason why he's thinking of canceling the trip is because he feels like he doesn't have God's support anymore, or he feels that this is a sign, as in maybe by the gods, that this is not going to work, and that's why he wants to turn back, not because of like a real factual deficiency that he would have without Jatinda.
And Amar responds in a quite magnificent way, which kind of removes young Mukunda's doubt, and really, if ever his faith needed strengthening, this is exactly what it does. He says it you can imagine the force with which he asked this rhetorical question: is this your love for the Lord? can't you stand the little test of a treacherous companion? Really powerful, isn't it? Is this your love for the Lord? It's like he's young Amar is speaking to all of us when we have a doubt, or when we have a moment of when we feel that God isn't, with us perhaps, or when we're feeling a lack of love or a lack of devotion. It's just so powerful how he said it, even though it's quite confrontational, isn't it? But that level of confrontation, Mukunda is obviously capable of handling. You can't say that kind of question to just anyone, can you? If you said that to someone new on the path, or someone who didn't have such a strong faith, then that would be the start of a very big argument.
Yeah, it takes a real friend though to shake us awake, doesn't it, and to redirect us back to our goal when we forget. In that moment his friend could have said, okay, yeah, let's go, but he didn't. And I think that as well shows such a divine spiritual friendship between the two of them. They're able to keep each other lifted up when the other one dips. It's really beautiful, and it does make me think, how we approach our life's challenges. It's definitely a lesson.
Indeed. And Amar says, yeah, Mike, sorry.
I was just gonna say that this is a lesson for our lives, because we come to those kind of points all the time, right? And then the question is, does this actually mean I shouldn't do it, or does that mean I have to power through and it's just a test, right? Have you guys ever been in those moments? Because I'm sure they come to all of us, and then sometimes you need an Amar in your life who just tells you, come on, keep going. This is not time to quit.
Hopefully we can be your 3 Amars, Mike, in this podcast. And likewise, you 3 certainly are for me, so thank you. So, and listeners as well. The listener, you're the 4th, I should say, Amar in this relationship. Really like your comments. Thank you so much for your encouragement, etc. So then he kind of says, can't you stand the little test of a treacherous companion? Now, I always found it difficult to understand the concept of God testing us, because in my limited understanding, we're creating the scenario that we're currently in because of our past actions, and where we the trajectory of our lives that we actually is predetermined because of what the actions or the choices we've taken in the past. So is it that God's testing you, or you've just created the scenario or circumstance for yourself? And Guruji obviously does say, that God's tests, and that you must overcome, and you must overcome the test of, for example, the monkey mind, where you need to calm those stormy thoughts, for example, in meditation. So there's that meditation test, and then there's that other test of not caving into the senses in outward life, for example. Mike?
Yeah, and I strongly believe in that oftentimes in life, God is putting the carrot right in front of you and says, just a little more, because he is a way to motivate us. And I think the right reaction is also the one that Mukunda had, that maybe I should call it sportsmanship, like take it as a challenge, you go like, okay, I can do this. Instead of, the other reaction could have been, no, I feel like this is no fun anymore. I'm quitting. But instead of saying, okay, if there is a challenge out there and it's a challenge by God, then I'll put all my power into it.
Mm. Indeed. And Amar, Yogananda says that at Amar's suggestion of a divine test. So now Yogananda is calling it a divine test. So he's added to Amar's a little nugget of truth and made it like a big mountain of truth by calling it a divine test. And then he said, then my heart steadied itself, he says. So he's, again, like, this is the influence of some positive people or in your life, or optimistic people in your life, where they lift you up when you're feeling down. So you can stand on mountains, Lauren. I'm sure you can sing that better than all of us.
Which song is that?
Lift me up so I can stand on mountains.
Oh, that was glorious. Thank you, Priyank.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, I know the one. Yeah.
You knew it, didn't you? You've made me sing it.
No, I didn't actually, but I'm
Okay.
glad I asked, because now everyone got to hear you sing. So thank you. It actually got me thinking when you were speaking about this, how if Mukunda had listened to his intuition, this trip would never have gone ahead, just as it was meant to be. It was never meant to happen. Because at the very beginning, he felt the ill omen, right? But he didn't listen to the intuition. He went anyway. And then when things started to fall apart, his friend tells him, well, is this your love for the Lord? Can't you withstand this test? And by the reason of his mind, he thinks, perhaps, this is the Lord's test, and he goes ahead. But it falls apart anyway. So I'm just reflecting, sometimes we think we're being tested by God, but we're just not listening to our intuition, and we're using the test as sort of a divine, we think it's a divine test, but actually it's just a circumstance born of not listening to that inner voice. I know I've certainly had this in my own life, so I think this is perhaps why I'm reflecting on it, but it's quite interesting. Just food for thought there.
It's quite good food. Sorry, Chris, before you come in, because he didn't listen to. You say he didn't listen to his intuition. There was an ill omen, so he kind of knew when it rained that he wasn't going to make it to the Himalayas. But it doesn't mean that it was a worthless trip.
No,
because,
exactly. There's so many lessons in the journey.
Exactly. So the journey failed, but along the way there was beautiful moments, and obviously in the next few episodes we're going to talk about those beautiful moments that he has, and this is also one of them, isn't it? This moment where he's become gone from the doubting man, in tears, to just being lifted up by his friend Amar. But yeah, Chris.
Yeah, this skill is probably one of the more challenging but rewarding or fun skills to build in your life. Being aware of all these little moments, like, oh yeah, this did cross my mind, and I did notice this, and probably should listen to that little, like I call it the voice in the back of the head, which my dad always used to tell me as a kid to listen out for. And funny now with SRF, the medulla oblongata, and learning as the mouth of God comes through there. So it all makes sense now to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a great page on the yssofindia.org site on spiritual, conquering fear, anxiety, and worry. And we can link to that. There's so many good quotes there from Yogananda, but one of them, and it ties into what we're discussing here in the autobiography, he quotes, "When the consciousness is kept on God, you will have no fears. Every obstacle will then be overcome by courage and faith." So keep the consciousness on God, and then you'll have no fears. So Yogananda said he steadied his heart, and he kind of went back to center, and I think that's probably what happened there to some extent. But there's so many great quotes there, so we can link that for anybody who wants to jump on and find some inspiration.
Indeed. And then so Yogananda kind of treats himself. He's gone through this ordeal where he's in tears, and and then he's like, okay, let's start afresh, and he kind of let's start afresh by enjoying some sweetmeats, and they and they got a few things to refresh themselves, shall we say, sweet foods. So one of the things was Sita Bhog, which is Bhog is which means food that's offered to the Lord is Bhog. So Sita is obviously Ram's consort, Sita. So Sita Bhog is food offered to Sita. And motichur, which is nuggets of sweet pearl. And this is a very nice sweet in India. So it's like it's made with like chickpea flour, and it's pressed into a ball and then fried, and then sugar is added to it, sugar syrup is added to it. So it's very like very, very nice, and it's very. The reason he said it's sweet pearl is because that's what it looks like. It looks like little pearls, like all glued together, and it kind of melts in your mouth. It's very nice. If you go to India, I'd highly recommend it. Mike?
I'm gonna keep my eyes open now for those. I want to try both of them. One of them seems a bit like a sweet rice, right? And the other one seems like a crispy, crunchy version of a gulab jamun, but probably have a different texture.
Yeah, very different. Yep. Yeah. So the rice one is probably the Sita Bhog, but it can be anything actually because of what it is. But the moti chur is moti means diamond, and so it's just really describing what it looks like. It's quite a nice name for a food, isn't it? So then they said that they kind of went towards Haridwar via Bareilly, and then they also went to Mughal Sarai, where they discussed some vital matters on the platform. So let's go to the next card. So Yogananda, being very worried, he says to Amar, listen, people are going to start questioning us and our presence, and he kind of suggests that Ananta is always, a very good investigative person, brother, detective, and he's suggesting that we need to be ready, essentially. But he said, I will not speak untruth. Mike?
Yeah, there's two things. I feel like one thing that makes the story so good is that Ananta is such a good detective, right? That he goes and picks up clues and asks people, interrogate. Like, we'll see a lot of this still, but it's just amazing. I'm not sure, like, those are all exceptional personalities. And yeah, of course, it becomes really difficult to I want to say fool somebody, but to kind of make this impression that you're not those people who you're supposed to be. If you say, I'm not going to tell untruth, right? It's a real constraint.
Yeah, it is a real constraint, especially when you're doing something naughty, as Lauren described my carjacking last time.
Oh, yes.
Yes. I really found that his resolution to not speak any untruth was a little bit, quite hit my heart. It's quite dear to my heart, that concept, truthfulness. I always love Gandhi's quote that they use on the back of his autobiography, which is, I have nothing new to teach the world. Truth and non-violence are as old as the hills. And as I say that, I'm looking at a painting of some hills, and I always think hills, hills are ancient, aren't they? Millions, thousands, hundreds of thousands of years old, probably. Yeah, Mike?
So I don't know if you guys ever do this, but sometimes it's just more convenient to omit part of the truth or something than to go into great detail about it and open a discussion, or I don't know, those kind of situations I face sometimes. And I don't know if it's because of this chapter or something, but somehow I got comfortable with sometimes just saying that part that just is convenient and not saying the rest, and getting away with it, and feeling that I did not lie. I just did not talk about something I didn't want to talk about. What do you guys feel about this? Is this okay, or is this an act of I don't know? Am I acquiring bad karma like that?
I don't think so, Mike. I think we probably can't take the lessons from Yogananda here, because he says this directly, doesn't he? He's asked, "Are you running away in anger?" And he was thankful that the I think it was the policeman asked such a direct question, specific question. So he was able to answer it truthfully. No, I'm not running away in anger. I'm probably running away in love. Like, it's the opposite in some sense. So he was very happy that he didn't have to, come up with some untruth there and or be in a position where he had to think, how can I answer this without lying? And I agree with you, Mike. I use this tactic as well. So if anybody, it's all about the question itself. And I think equally, what's true is, if somebody asks a legitimate question and there is a truthful answer to it, I would be more willing to give that answer, even if it, on the face of it, could have been a difficult circumstance. If somebody does ask a specific question, and I think actually the truth is X, I'm not going to avoid it if they ask the direct question. So I think it probably can be used to your benefit in both senses.
I'll offer a contrary opinion. Mike, I fully understand where you're going with what you were saying. I must say I stretch this concept to the very limit. If someone if someone asks me what's the color of my wall, I'll say it's a mixture of blue and red, rather than saying it's purple, for example, when it's clearly just purple. But I love doing that, and I love how Mukunda, in Chris's example a bit later in this section, uses it to his advantage. And I found a very nice text actually about this in God Talks with Arjuna, about the soul qualities that make God man-like, in chapter 16. Lauren, do you want to read those out?
I would love to. It says, "Truth, Satya, is the foundation stone of the universe. The worlds are built on truth," says the Mahabharata. "Men and civilizations stand or fall according to their attitude toward truth. An honest person is spontaneously admired by all right-thinking men. The Hindu scriptures, however, point out that a devotee whose ideal is truth should always exercise judgment and common sense before speaking. It is not enough merely to tell the truth. One's words should also be sweet, healing, and beneficial to others. Hurtful statements, however accurate, are usually better left unsaid. Many a heart has been broken, and many a life wrecked by the truth spoken by others inopportunely. A sage carefully watches his speech, lest he wound those who are not yet ready to hear and profit by his veracious observations."
Kind of reaffirms what Mike was hinting at when he said about being very careful with what you say. Sometimes it's a very beautifully said by Yogananda, isn't it? You can't treat truthfulness and honesty as a gospel. Sometimes it can be wrong to do it, and he's said the circumstances where it can. He says life wrecked by truths spoken by others inopportunely. Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, this brings back a sentence that I read very long time ago, but it always stuck with me. I don't remember if it was in a book or somewhere in a lesson, but it was, if the truth is hurtful, then it's not the truth. And I was like, wow, this kind of, at this point when I read this, I was like, this is mind-boggling, and but I think this is a really good explanation of what this meant there.
So Chris, has Mike and Paramahansa Yogananda in this chapter, has he convinced you to his way of thinking, as opposed to what you were saying just now?
Yeah, I don't think what I said was actually in contradiction to what they said, to be honest. But
Okay.
The truth, yeah, you can shape the truth to be malleable to somebody's ears if you need to, in a sense. Doesn't have to be, truth doesn't always have to be harsh. But
shaping truth. Interesting thought, Mike.
I mean, it can be harsh and it can be hurtful, but I think what was meant and what he means here as well is if you can avoid hurting somebody, then you should, right? I feel like that's kind of the way it's meant there. There's no absolutes ever, but this is kind of because also that Guruji has a lot of diplomacy in the way he communicates, very different than his guru, for example, and maybe that also comes through in those statements. And that's probably a good. I feel like in those kind of ways, probably better to follow the school of Yogananda rather than Sri Yukteswar when we are out in social, like dealing with other people, right? That's what I'm thinking.
I think I need to go back and clarify what I said earlier, because I was thinking more specifically of, let's say, if there was an event, somebody close to you asked about truth about yoga, truth about X thing. So you might otherwise not have shared in this instance when your wife, Priyanka, is saying, hey, why are you talking about these things amongst different circles? Well, if somebody in that circle might have asked you directly about something, I wouldn't shy away from it if they were. That's, I suppose, where I was going with that. But I concur and agree with all of the above, and of course Yogananda's guidance on it.
Mike's very good at the diplomatically telling the truth, so as to rarely hurt people. He's very good at that. I am in the Sri Yukteswar camp. Lauren was laughing even before I got the word.
Yeah, I love that about you, Priyank.
With some sensitive young adults, I'm sure I should probably change my approach, but certainly I am the brute force bluntness school of Sri Yukteswar, and yeah, it doesn't always work out well, but I should change sometimes. Lauren.
I love the subject of truth. I feel so strongly about it that I almost daren't speak on it. But I just, if you think about what we're doing here on the path, it's to get to truth, to be at one with truth. And I think as long as our actions and our speech and our thoughts are in line with truth, then life will play out as it's meant, and we'll be living as we're meant to. So I think in all things we should be thinking, is this truth? And I'm not sure for me that truth can be bent, but it can be worded in a way that is sweet. So, if someone's to ask for an opinion and perhaps you didn't like it, you could offer something that is genuine, but is not a bending. But yes, always stick to truth for me anyway. It's strangely been something that's been with me quite fervently since a young age. I'm not sure where I got it from. Well, God himself, I'm sure. But yeah, I feel very strongly about truth. So living in accordance with that, absolutely.
I'm the same, Lauren. One of my earliest memories is when I kicked a football inside the house and broke one of my mum's treasured plates, with decorative plates or something she had, and immediately I knew I had to go and tell her. My sister advised me, hey, you don't need to tell her, we'll just clean it up, little buddies run around together, partners in crime. She advised me not to, but I went and told my mum, and I remember my mum's reaction was so strong in a positive way, that I came and confided and told her the truth, that it really stuck with me. Like, yeah, you know, if you have to face, you've done something wrong, you know, whatever it might be, you face that and you tell the truth, and then you go on from there. So yeah, from a young age, I'm saying, Lauren, it's a good trait for it to have.
Very good. I like the positivity. I've got a good example of the truth that can be bent, in a sense, not bent, sorry, limited truth being revealed rather than the whole truth. So for example, I'm one of the service readers support team now, where you have to offer feedback and support to new readers and old readers, actually. So one of the things that they teach you in offering support is that if the service, for example, let's say the service didn't go well and the reader got 5 things wrong, and it didn't go well because of those 5 things. Now you could just obviously you start with the good things. You say things like, you know, it was a very devotional service, you did really well, we could tell you, you know, you're connected to gurus, etc. All the things that are definitely true and that make the person feel good. So you have to say those things. But in dealing with the constructive feedback, you only deal with a little portion of it. So to say all 5 things will probably blow them over, and they'll be so terrified for the next service to read that they'll be destructive. But if you just say one thing, one of the 5 things, then they'll work on that and they'll still be in a good position. And they may even, out of their own accord, get the other things right through their own reflection, etc., in the next time. So yeah, I thought that was really good training for me personally. Lauren?
My mum used to tell me that when offering feedback, you should think of it like a sandwich. So you start with something good and positive, then you put the constructive thing that's maybe not so sweet in the middle, and then you end with something lovely and positive too. So the person goes away feeling uplifted, which I think is really nice. And it definitely goes along with what you're saying, Priyank.
So
but also I think
put the Marmite in the middle and as
yes,
on the top. Yeah,
exactly. But I think it depends on who you're speaking to. Like, for example, I know I've said to Priyank, well, you just be straight with me, I can take it. But some people don't like that approach. So you just have to do it by person, I think.
Speaking of Marmite or Vegemite, one instance where I did not tell the truth was with my cousin. I told him that he'd never tried Marmite before. And for those who don't know what Marmite is this like horrifically bitter, yeasty thing, malt thing, that it's a very much an acquired taste. And anyway, I told him it's chocolate sauce. So he took a tablespoon and just like put it in his mouth, and he obviously to this day he recalls that.
How old were you, Priyank?
Just last week. No, just kidding. It was probably like 12 or something like that.
Oh,
yeah. naughty days.
Yes.
I quite enjoy it. Yeah. Anyway, Chris.
This is a cheeky brand company. This is all good. Good skills. Thank you everybody for sharing. Good skills to build. I recruit for a living, so that's part and parcel of my job. Sometimes is to have these hard conversations with people. So I'm making mental notes of how to do that. I'll remember this sandwich and remember if I have 5 things, I'll filter them or drip feed them sometimes. But Guruji talks about it in a way that, when you're looking at yourself and you're giving yourself feedback and being, it's a key, it's an essential really on the yogic path, from what I understand to be, to analyze yourself and try to improve yourself. But he did provide a bit of a caution to not go overboard either, because it's not something, that's easy on the ego. And he had a very careful guru himself in Sri Yukteswar who disciplined him in a way that he said it was like pulling teeth. So, he does talk about this quite extensively throughout his teachings. And I do remember the first time when I read it, I thought, okay, that's good, because sometimes I can't be too harsh on myself when I'm providing my own critique. Guruji says, do it, but do it with caution. Go, slow and steady.
Yeah, one thing about Marmite is that my mom was a big fan of it, and I really didn't like it. Like sometimes I opened my lunchbox in school, and it was pizza bread, butter, Marmite, and I was like, no, this is the worst. This is the worst day. The worst thing that has ever happened to anybody. And now I like it because I cook a lot of vegan food, and you look for umami when you look at your vegan dishes, and Marmite is just full of it. So when I make a sauce or something, you add a spoon of it. Very, very good. And yeah, when it comes to Guruji in this moment, I had a really good point, but I lost it now. I was so all about the Marmite. I'll get back to it later.
Chris, in your saying about how you would want to be treated, personally, I really want brutal honesty. I can handle, like Lauren said, I can handle it, but that then leaves me open to the fact that others aren't necessarily of that same ilk, and then when I offer that same method, then it's obviously the wrong method. Mike.
Yeah, I think it's really good what you just said, and also what Chris said earlier, that when you are in a public role, you have to be diplomatic, right? You can't just go out and dish out your feedback to everybody. But then you develop those intimate relationships. You have like really good friendships. You have your life partner. You have all those people in your life, and with them it's different. With them, I feel like the more you can offer blunt feedback, the more effective communication becomes. And I think that's one of the features of the guru-disciple relationship that Guruji had with Sri Yukteswar, was that he could give instant feedback, and maybe it was a blow to the ego, but Guruji knew how to take it and how to act on it. And that's really one of the secrets of progress in this kind of relationship.
Yes, indeed. So let's move on. So then, he says, Mukunda says, I'll not speak on truth. And then Amar tries to reason with young Mukunda. He says, okay, don't speak on truth, but just don't grin, don't laugh. I will do all the talking, says Amar. And I'm paraphrasing. And then exactly at that moment, as if predestined, presaged, a European station attendant accosted young Mukunda, and he waved a telegram in his face. He said, are you running away? Basically asking them. And then Mukunda had the opportunity to, as Chris said, honestly and truthfully say, no, not running away. Why would I run? I'm fearless, as we know he is. It was a very good way of asking the question that Mukunda thought, because he obviously didn't have to lie because he's not running away. And then he says something quite beautiful, and he says it wasn't, he's not running away in anger in his mind. He's running away because of divinest melancholy, and that is the responsible cause of his unconventional behavior. He describes it, and divinest melancholy. Now this there's a very nice book called Crying for Krishna, which the book is, as the title suggests, stretching your devotional longing for God such that you cry because you haven't yet experienced him, or you can't yet see him. And in the Autobiography of a Yogi, Mukunda often says that he used to meditate deep into the night and have tears because Divine Mother isn't yet revealing herself to him, etc. So he was crying for Krishna. And there's also another nice talk by Brother Achalananda, which I'll put a link to, and he's written also there. And Dayamata said this as well: never be ashamed to cry for God. And I think it's very powerful, if you can do it. It's a very powerful way to increase your devotion and therefore your faith, and then therefore you're progressing, I suppose, in a more accelerated way toward God, because you can obviously do it through meditation, and we do, but this is like another of the techniques that requires not meditation, but like an active, thoughtful, prayerful mode where you're, literally yearning to see God. You're yearning, and you're praying, and you're crying because you haven't yet attained your goal. And Guruji says, God responds. He responds to a sincere devotee who is in that state of being. So this is a very powerful concept. Guruji could have written a book about this, and he could have entitled it "Divinest Melancholy," and I'm sure he would have. It would have been one of the most popular books in SRF had he have done that. But unfortunately, we have to get these concepts out of little talks here and there, and lessons here and there, and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a very, very cool that he's put it in here, and in the midst of such a amusing episode, amusing part of the story, i.e. a station attendant asking or questioning him, which is quite cool, which is another quite skillful writing style, isn't it? He's woven in profound spiritual methods into on the face of it just an amusing encounter, or an amusing set of encounters. Like, for example, just now he said, I will not speak on truth. That was one there. And then now divinest melancholy was responsible for his unconventional behavior. Then so then as the story goes on, so the Amar then has to have a go at speaking with this station attendant, and they were debating, they were discussing, and question and riposte, and it was pretty funny, and he could hardly Mukunda could hardly maintain a straight face. And then they ask, the station attendant asks where the third boy, and this is also another really funny element. So Amar says, I see you're wearing glasses. Can't you see that there's only two of us? I'm not a magician. I can't just make someone disappear, or like Swami Paramahansa produce a second body, so there'll be three of us in the same presence. And the official was disconcerted apparently by this, and then went to a new line of attack, because he obviously knew the names of the people, the boys. They said, "What's your name?" And Amar says, "I am called Thomas. I am the son of an English mother and a converted Christian father." And then he asked, "What's your friend's name?" And the reason he probably asked him, because Mukunda was like mouth zipped shut. He was letting Amar do all the talking. And then he says, I call him Thompson. So Amar is technically not lying there, because you can call someone whatever you want to. But it's pretty unrealistic that one of the boys would be called Thomas, another would be called Thompson, and the third boy in that line probably called Tom. Would you say? I don't know. Tom, Thomas, and Thompson. Like,
I think the fact that Jatinda has already left makes this whole situation easier for them to get through, right? Because I feel like if it was just been the three boys in European clothes, they would have just caught them. But this way, it gave them an avenue to escape. Like you said, Priyanki said, do you need glasses, or can you see there's only two, and I cannot materialize a third one, right? So, and that made the station official doubt himself, probably. And then I mean, those names are ridiculous, but it's funny that they got through it, and I think they even use it again later when they're asked again, right?
Yeah,
But they stick with those names.
Yep. So that conversation carries on, and eventually the station attendant believes them, and then Lauren.
Well, you say he does believe him, but what I love just before this moment of belief is that when his friend says, "Oh, I call him Thompson," he writes, "By this time, my inward mirth had reached a zenith. I unceremoniously made for the train." So you can just imagine, he's like, "No, I've got to go on my divine mission." And he just heads for the train. He doesn't even say goodbye or thank you to the official. He doesn't make any conversation. He just goes. Just, again, it's comedy in such a sweet way, you know. Oh, I love it.
So he was laughing so much that he couldn't hold it in, that he had to turn around and run in the other direction. I'm reminded of a few similar instances with my school teachers, actually. Very angry school teachers. I would probably have been the cause of such anger, but yeah, another day. The Amar then followed with, so they're going towards the train. Amar follows with the official, and the official then puts them in a European compartment, because it pained him apparently to think that two half English boys would be traveling with the natives. Mike.
Well, I mean, this is just a little hint about how India, in what state India was at this point, right? India was under foreign rule. It was under British rule. And apparently that rule was so detailed that they would even run their railroads. So you would take a train, and then there's like would be like an apartheid system, right? Where you kind of have different carriages for different, I would say, races. So really terrible situation there. But Guruji does not go into it much, but it was definitely there.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't go into it. In fact, I don't think he talks about racism or anything such as that in the whole of the autobiography. I could stand to be corrected. He focuses on the positive, but he doesn't avoid writing it. So he writes it as it is, and then it leaves the reader to then question what the rule of the British and what their track record and what their history was, which is usually starkly different to how history is taught in English schools, and because this kind of thing is omitted usually in our history lessons. But yeah, it's quite cool how he's just slotted it in there and allowed us to then interpret it and dig deeper if we should so wish. So anyway, they get to their train compartment and they both laugh uproariously, as you would, because you've outwitted a veteran European official, and probably even more funny because like he put them in a European carriage. So they've not only like outwitted him in the sense of the lie, but the lie has been so potent that he's basically had to go away from the racial prejudice and put them. So he's like two layers of amusement for young boys. I certainly would have been laughing uproariously at this point. Lauren, can you imagine yourself being in a crowd of people such as two boys such as this, two girls perhaps?
What do you mean? In which way?
At this age, would you have been laughing uproariously if you've cried all the way home?
No, I'd have probably been laughing too. Although I have to say, I laugh a lot. I see the comedy in a lot of things. So
yes, you do. So then they read the telegram, and Brother Ananta, and from Brother Ananta, it said essentially, really the detective Ananta is in full power. He says in his telegram, it says 3 Bengali boys in English clothes running away from home towards Haridwar via Mughal Sarai. Please detain them until my arrival. Ample reward for your services. And ample reward is obviously kind of giving a temptation, would you say, to all the station staff around the area to take it seriously, because they're going to get rewarded. Yeah, it's like a commission. So everyone is on high alert because there's a bit of money to be had, which is similar to bribery, I suppose, but nuanced. But in India, it's much less prevalent today than how it was even 10 years ago and 15 years ago. So I can't imagine what it was like in the days where we're talking about here in the 1910s or 1900s. It would have been, 1903 or something like that, may have been perhaps. Well, yeah, there were 12, weren't they? So 1906 it would have been. Yes. So they so then Mukunda says he kind of rebukes Amar. Tables have turned a little bit. Amar was rebuking Mukunda, and now Mukunda's rebuking Amar for the mistake of leaving marked timetables. I mean, that is just such, up till now, the plan was masterful, but to leave a trail, a breadcrumb trail, that is just, there's only one thing that's going to happen out of that. But I really liked that he was frank here, and he kind of let him have it, isn't it? He didn't hold back the punch there. Mike.
I guess today, when you do something like this, I would probably open my notes app in the iPhone and start taking notes if I plan something like this. But back then, there wasn't really another way, right? You had to write everything down on paper. And his mistake was that he didn't think someone would come into his room actually and check those things, right? Like Ananta did.
In my mind, all I've got is like all the stuff like out on his bed, on his desk, and like lines and times, everything like clear as light and day. And therefore, then Ananta would have had no problems finding exactly where they were going to be and at what time. So another subtle thing is that Amar sheepishly acknowledged the thrust, which is quite cool, because often God teaches us little lessons such as this, and then we deny them, or we say, no, it's just a coincidence, or no, it can't possibly be because of that mistake. But here Amar acknowledges the thrust, and he admits that it was him that was in the wrong here, and the cause of probably them getting caught, and the cause of the plan and the trip being foiled. So I thought that was pretty cool. Then they go to Bareilly, as we said, where Dwarka Prasad is waiting for them. And Dwarka tries to stop them, essentially. And Ananta is probably also told Dwarka that if you stop them, then you'll get amply rewarded. So he's really, really valiantly, Guruji says, valiantly trying to detain them, possibly even with physical force. But we know young Mukunda was a strong, athletic boy. Mike?
And we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Dwarka Prasad is making a comeback here, right? He was already there when Guruji lived in Bareilly with his dad briefly. So, and I feel like having an actual friend meet you, recognize you, telling you not to go. Isn't this like a busted moment? Isn't this like a kind of thing? But somehow they just brush him off and go like, we'll just continue.
Of course, they've got some experience of this, because this is Mukunda's at least second attempt to run away to the Himalayas, because the first attempt we're told about in chapter 2, after his mother's passing, where he wanted to run away to the Himalayas, and Dwarka Prasad basically revealed the plan to Ananta. So this is the second attempt, shall we say, at least. And because of that, they've obviously got no respect, no trust in Dwarka Prasad. So it was easy for them potentially not to listen to him. But interestingly, this is a bit interesting, because he again asked Dwarka to join him. So even after the first time, where he's basically been that Judas, been the Jatinda, and then the second time now he's trying to valiantly trying to stop them. And Mukunda saying, "You come with me," which is quite cool, isn't it? It's like infinite compassion. You get infinite chances to get board that train, or board that ship that God's boatman is taking you on, Mike.
Do you think Amar got heaps of good karma by sticking with Mukunda till the end, kind of?
I do conjecture, of course, but I really find it quite lovely that Mukunda's still he's been burnt again, and yet he's still willing to infinite forgiveness, isn't it? What a true friend, someone like that to have in your life. So yes, so so there's so the train stood at the station the whole night, and Amar was awakened by another official, and they too got convinced by the Thomas and Thompson escapades story. And then they got to Haridwar, and the majestic mountains loomed, and as I said earlier, the mountains, like in part of the snowy sky, snow cap, it kind of merges into one where you can't really see the middle of the mountains, but that's what he's alluding to there, loomed invitingly in the distance. So they went through the station, went into the city, the freedom of the city crowds, and changed their clothes, because Ananta had somehow penetrated the European disguise. That's true, actually. How would Ananta have known that they were going to change into European clothes? I suppose Ananta knows Mukunda supremely well, so probably knows the kind of tricks that he would play to evade capture. But we don't know. Quite brilliant detective skills. And then this is now the third occasion now where Mukunda sees an ill omen, where he says, "A premonition of capture weighed on my mind." So he kind of keeps getting signs throughout this journey that he's going to not succeed in his wish to find the yogi amidst Himalayan snows, Mike.
Yeah, but he's still not stopping, because he's kind of pulled into two different directions, right? He's on the one hand keeps having the visions of the guru, and he keeps having the visions of the yogis in the Himalayan snows. And then he goes there, and then he keeps having visions of being captured or ill omens. So it must have been a bit frustrating at this point.
I should say as well, Frank, the listeners, the heavily detailed listeners will know in the later part of the chapter, Ananta does reveal how he knows that they have European clothes or garms.
Yes.
So he has a strong indicator, let's say a clue, as he calls it, like 3 clues. So will not reveal.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
Something to do with shoes. Yeah.
Mhm. Right. So then that pretty much is where we're going to stop it. Now in we talked a lot about how much Mukunda wanted to go to the Himalayas, and in Mejda, little Sananda writes about his brother. He says, I often saw him immersed in meditation, forgetful of his surroundings, his mind soaring upward to mingle with the infinite. In such states, tears of longing for the Divine Mother would spill from his eyes. Other times he would weep and pray, "Oh Mother, my dear Mother, they will not allow me to come to you." Seeing him this way brought tears to my eyes and kindled in me an anger towards Ananta. Why did Alberta treat Mejda so? Very sweet.
Mm.
And I think that's a good point for us to end it. Chris, what can we look forward to next week?
So yes, next week we will delve deeper into the moment when the boys are finally caught. We have a very special little story, not little story, we have a special, amazing story from a policeman where he talks about meeting a sadhu. It's all coincidental timing, of course. So we'll delve into that story. And then we'll look at Yogananda's continued efforts to try to escape captivity as he finds himself in the next part of the chapter.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chris and Mike and Lauren. We shall see you all listeners next week. Thank you so much for being with us.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.